Yeah, yes. Said that one of his posts was spending 25% of the time working and 75% of the time looking for a meal. You know, like it's just so hard to, you know, get going and stuff. So it's really tough. And I'm hoping that, you know, because which I haven't dipped into yet in either one of them, I'm hoping that this goes to go.
Good morning, Monsterpaloozians. How are you today? Please just give us a couple minutes. We're waiting for a few more people to come in, and then we'll begin the Mighty Joe Young panel. Thank you. For the classic fans in our crowd of the great Mighty Joe Young. Yes, let's hear it. Joe needs more respect, don't you think? Mr. Joseph Young of Africa. Well, I'd like to bring up our moderator for our Mighty Joe Young panel, my friend Scott Essman, who will then introduce his panel. Scott.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to have you guys here. We've been planning this for a long time. This is a unique, excuse me, a unique opportunity for me. I saw these films, Mighty Joe, King Kong, Frankenstein, when I was growing up in the 70s on Long Island, New York, and we would get the feed from New York City. Luckily, we were about 30 miles out. But we'd get all the New York channels, so they would show these movies. And this is a personal favorite. I always loved Mighty Joe, and the opportunity to do this is a thrill. Let me bring up some amazing people. The first person is a historian and a filmmaker, and he has special knowledge about Willis O'Brien, who created this amazing film and was the technical effects supervisor. And he also restored and produced a Willis O'Brien film, The Ghost of Slumber Mountain.
Oh, nice.
From the silent period. And he's made a documentary that we hope to come out soon about Willis O'Brien. Please bring him up, Mr. Steve Austin. This next fellow is a makeup effects expert. And this guy, believe it or not, in a string, did all these amazing movies, including working on Dick Smith's crew on Altered States. But then on his own, he worked on E.T., the E.T. character, Poltergeist, The Gate, Dreamscape, the Twilight Zone movie, the Gremlin on the wing of the airplane. That's all this guy. His name is Craig Reardon. And last but definitely not least, this fellow is a stop-motion animator who is now an animation supervisor. And this fellow worked on some amazing stop-motion movies, including Caveman, The Terror Dogs and Ghostbusters,
Oh, nice.
I'm Batman, The Gate, a million others, and was the animation supervisor for the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. And my favorite of those, I just told him backstage, was the Balrog. Remember that one? Gets Gandalf with his whip. Please welcome Randall William Cook. Now, just to start us off, this film features stop-motion animation at a time where it was done for photorealism, to realistically animate characters who were all based in puppets, so that you believed what was happening on screen. Just to be clear, nowadays, there is stop-motion animation being done, right? There's a studio in Portland called Leica, and they do stop-motion animated films, such as Kubo and the Two Strings, Box Trolls, Paranorman, and my favorite, which is Coraline. So that's still being done, right? And of course, Tim Burton will pop off a stop-motion animated movie, A Corpse Bride or a Frankenweenie. But at this point, stop-motion is done almost as an homage to this great technique of old, and less so for photorealism, which is largely gone to computer graphics. Does everyone understand?
Yes.
So, this movie, which we're going to watch an excerpt of right now, was done to give you the idea that the character of Joe was photorealistic. And the effects supervisor on the show who won an Oscar. I believe his only Oscar is Willis O'Brien. Most of the animation, excuse me, most of the animation, the day-to-day animated work of the puppet was done by Ray Harryhausen. As a matter of fact, he told me on the record 20 years ago that he did roughly 80% of the animation. There was obviously Willis O'Brien supervising everything, and another animator who's sort of a largely forgotten fellow named Pete Peterson. He also worked on quite a bit of the animation in that film. So, we're going to start you off with a clip. Now, I want you guys to watch closely. You're going to see a live-action lion with a stop-motion Joe, right? You're also going to see a stop-motion lion climbing out of his cage. Then he's going to go behind Joe and goes back to a live-action lion. See if you can see that. Also, he's going to be, this is called the roping sequence. He's going to be roped by some cowboys. I want you to watch carefully because when Joe is interacting with a rope, that's a stop-motion effect done in miniature. The cowboys obviously have real ropes, right, in their horse and roping attempts. Watch carefully, though, for many of the characters Joe interacts with are stop-motion people. Look closely for the stop-motion people. And the last thing I want you to watch for is they did build a giant hand prop that's going to be swinging a guy. Watch for the giant hand prop, because that's not a stop-motion piece. It's the only one I believe that's in the movie. Can we please show clip one to start us off? Enjoy Mighty Joe Young, the roping sequence. A movie that's 75 years old. I found a very good digital copy of it and edited these clips for us last week. The elephant in the room, no pun intended, is that the crew of King Kong largely worked on this movie. And one cast member in the pith helmet, I think it's called. Did you see Robert Armstrong? He played Carl Denham in King Kong, and he's Max O'Hara here. Similar character. Obviously, this character's not a filmmaker, but the same trajectory. Linwood Dunn, who worked on King Kong, did the optical compositing on both films. And that guy was a genius in terms of compositing together unlike images. And I believe we have people on our panel who used optical printing when you guys did your work. And the first question for Randy Cook is, how different was the animation in this, largely what we saw by Ray Harryhausen, with overseeing by Willis O'Brien, who rightfully won his Oscar. How different was what they did here 75 years ago to what you guys were doing in those great films I mentioned in the 80s, Caveman, The Gate, where you did that demon, the Ghostbusters, Terror Dogs, and so forth?
One of the significant differences is that the character here was the star, Mighty Joe Young, the titular character, and also had probably a better opportunity to express a full-on performance, because you saw him at the beginning of the picture and you saw him at the end of the picture. Not to give away any spoilers, but he's a very well-developed character and well-realized. It's a good part, in other words, right? Ray and Pete Peterson, the second animator on this, was a grip who said, I think I could do that. He's watching for a while, and then he did some tests. The tests, I believe, were 3 shots in the opening scene where you see Joe walking along, you know, and he was looking past the elephants was one, a rear projection shot, I believe, and 2 others where he looks back. It's sort of a grassy little area. Anyway, point is, he deserves some props, but Ray, you know, at 27 when he did this, was a man of great, he's a guy who could do great silent pantomime. Nowadays, in things like the Leica films that you mentioned before, you have talking. Ray didn't have any dialogue in this. And he didn't have any dialogue really in any of his pictures, except his last one, where they used a human up close for close-ups, but basically, silent movie pantomime was his forte, and he did it beautifully. So, you know, I think among other things, the only other thing I'll mention here is that Ray employed a sort of dictum of O'Brien's, which was to make it convincing you've got to have physical interaction between the live characters and the animated characters. And sometimes that's bloody difficult if you're holding onto a rope or holding onto photo cutouts of Max O'Hara as he swung back and forth, not as effective as some of the other shots. He employed, he basically made contact, And what Ray learned and used throughout his career thereafter was, it's better to have contact for a couple of frames because of registration. If you have a skeleton striking, an animated skeleton striking a human sword, right? It's easier to make that credible, and it's less demanding work than to have subtle changes in a live action rope transitioning to an animated rope, right? Those are just really, really difficult to do. Now it's all a gimmick. Now you can track stuff via software and AI and 100 employees in India. You can track stuff that is perfect, but ditto the compositing, which is all zeros and ones and not photochemical. So they had huge challenges here, and there is such a breadth of work in that sequence alone, but throughout the whole film, that it's amazing that it works at all, much less as well as it does. But it also is dependent upon the realization of a really good character, which carries you past whatever physical imperfections you may perceive. That's all.
Fantastic. Randall William Cook, guys. Did you guys see the stop motion people in that sequence?
Yeah.
When they're interacting with Joe directly or right behind him, typically they're stop motion people. And then they did the little stop motion Anne, the character, Terry Moore. By the way, Terry Moore is alive.
Yep.
She's 95 years old. And I think she's the only one left from this movie who's still around. 95, still alive, and she was a teenager when she got that role in that movie. Mr. Reardon, in your estimation, you've created so many great screen characters for us. E.T. and Poltergeist and Dreamscape, the Twilight Zone movie. How do you rank this character of Joe and what Ray and Willis O'Brien accomplished with him, please?
Well, it's the fascinating thing about Mighty Joe Young. I first heard Mighty Joe Young when I was like 6 years old. A kid up the street says, "You got to see Mighty Joe Young. It's on TV." And I said, "What is it?" I thought it was a pretty weird title. What? And I found out it was a gorilla, and I didn't see it actually catch it until years later. And I think pursuant to that, I think he's still estranged, and he lives somewhere between a real gorilla and King Kong.
Yeah.
So he has more gorilla-like, naturalistic gorilla-like appearance, but he still retains the antic personality of, at some point, like a silent film comic, at other points, like a hero in a Western. I mean, his personality slightly changes through the movie, so that you're constantly engaged by him. He doesn't ever bore you. He's not a one-trick pony as far as how he's written and how he's basically realized. And though O'Brien basically oversaw this movie, from everything I've ever heard, including from his widow, I had the privilege of meeting on a couple of occasions, though, really delightful, with Darlene. Willis was a very relaxed, funny guy. He liked to have fun. He liked to go out and dance and drink and, you know, go to the fights. And, you know, he was a kind of what they used to call a regular guy. And I think some of that is instilled into the behavior, certainly of King Kong, which was really in his hands, literally. And also probably in conflict. So Ray worshipped him. So, I mean, anything that Obi thought, Ray wanted to please Obi. I know that. And if that didn't please Obi, I'm a monkey's behind, you know, because, I mean, but yeah, I think as characters go, Mighty Joe stands alone in a way. He's not King Kong. And he's certainly not Conga, thank God, or any other of these ludicrous man-in-suit gorillas, with the exception of some of Charlie Gamora's, and that's worth a whole other show. But most of them were like, oh, give me a break, you know. Oh, I'm scared. So yeah, I love him, and I've loved him my whole life. And I, of course, am not an animator, but I love stop motion animation, you know, and Randy loves it, and Steve loves it. You don't have to do it. Helps, I'm sure, to really appreciate all the real effort that went into it. But you don't have to do it for it to, you know, basically cast a spell on you. I hope some of you who are seeing this stuff for the first time are you know, suitably impressed. Give somebody else some oxygen.
Thank you very much. Greg Reardon, everyone. Stephen L. Austin. Willis O'Brien, historian, documentarian, restored one of Willis's films. How important is Willis, in your estimation, to the history of film? Forget Mighty Joe Young for a second, but just movies. And why did you first take an interest in him?
I would say that without O'Brien, the entire visual effects industry would not be what it is today. Between Lost World and King Kong, they are the mother of all visual effects films. And it was his pioneering work, not just his inventiveness, but actually, you know, creating things from whole cloth. And the fact that he mentored Ray brought the whole field into a whole new light, because there was stop motion elsewhere in the world. I don't think O'Brien was even aware of it back in the early teens, 1915 or so, when he was experimenting with clay boxers. It was unlikely that he had seen stuff like Méliès or other European magicians like Starwich who were doing animation. So he was inventing, at least as, to me, he's the father of American stop motion animation. And I wanted to tell people who don't know who O'Brien was prior to King Kong. I'm going to give you a quick, zippy biography. Is that he was a teenage runaway. He was a cowboy. He was a fossil hunter for scientists at USC in Oregon. He was a sports cartoonist doing caricatures for sports. And he was also a pro amateur boxer who was not very good at his job because his nickname was Canvasback O'Brien. So yeah, all this before, you know, when he was a young man, and then eventually just experimenting with, you know, clay characters when he was on the top of the roof of a building with another employee, and he finally thought of the idea of shooting them frame by frame, one by one. And then he worked with people like Edison and doing shorts for them, documentary style shorts, educationals, and eventually hooked up with a guy named Dolly. And there's a whole story, which is controversial, but he did something called The Ghost of Slumber Mountain and Along the Moonbeam Trail. And they were silent films, and apparently Dolly was not happy that O'Brien credited himself as producer as well as animator. But Obi was in charge of creating the titles too, so, you know. But that's just in a box. That's Willis O'Brien, the father of stop motion.
Stephen L. Austin. All right, now I'm going to blow your minds. Get your cameras out. Can we show the photo, please? And watch this, guys. This is courtesy of stop motion legend Harry Walton. An actual photo of Mighty Joe Young. That's him. And pop your pictures now, or send me an email. And Harry was generous enough to share this with us. Notice the machined parts that make up his shoulders, arms, torso, legs, his head very carefully machined. That's Mighty Joe. Do any of you know exactly how tall he was? I heard a rumor that he was 12 inches. Is that accurate?
I think maybe a little bit, because the head was, there's a casting of the head that was taken.
Microphone.
What's that?
Can't hear microphone.
Thank you. There was a casting made of the head from one of the extant puppets that was about that big, so I put it close to 16 maybe.
And there was a miniature version also.
Yes, there were
Right.
four puppets that were very consistent in size. And then there was another one or two tiny ones for the long shots, like the first time you see him before he grabs the guy in the pith helmet off the horse, he climbs up, right? And that's a tiny one. They use tiny ones for long shots because of the studio space, you know? They were using rear projection a lot. It wasn't just been done. They were using specially made movie projectors that projected a frame at a time. And if you need a certain distance of throw, the projector that's projecting this is behind the screen, same principle, right? And if you've got a really, really wide shot, it's much more sensible to have a small puppet, so you don't have to have, a huge run of studio space taken up. One more thing, built by, this wasn't built, I think this was machined by probably Cunningham, who made the projectors, although I'm not sure, but the puppets were constructed by Marcel Delgado, who was the sculptor, yes, yeah, he's a real...
Born in Mexico.
Yeah.
Right.
And worked on King Kong.
Yes.
Yes, he created the puppets in King Kong under O'Brien's supervision.
And the Lost World.
And the Lost World, yeah, that's where they, I think, first hooked up. But he was a really, really good sculptor, and the fact that these puppets were not cast, but they were built up individually is notable because they all look like the same character, They didn't change from shot to shot or scene. Unlike Kong, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, he was a really, really talented guy and a very nice guy, and animated a few. He told, when I came to Los Angeles in 1969, I called him on the phone and we had a little chat, and he said that he had animated on both pictures. He said specifically on King Kong, the shot where he nearly tramples a baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Marcel claimed that was his, and I have no reason to disbelieve it.
And some of the shots of the orphanage at the end, climbing in the tree, he mentioned at the end. It was something.
Yeah.
We are going to look at another clip. This is clip 2. Max O'Hara, the one with the pith helmet, has brought Joe back to civilization, and he's somewhat of a performer with the Terry Moore character on stage at various times. In this sequence, he's going to be doing a tug of war with a group of strongmen. If we watch clip 2, please. Check it out.
That is the question to which we seek an answer. That is the test we are about to make.
That was supposed to be an elephant, by the way, in the original draft of the script. Joe was supposed to have a
Tug of war with the
elephant. Yeah.
That rope just now
Yes.
was very convincing, wasn't it?
The
When
way
is
they
it a
aligned
miniature
the
rope and
rope
when is it a live action
live
rope?
action.
It's very, very well done. Did you see the little stop motion guy that he picks up and throws? As far as I know, though, there was no other stop motion humans in that scene other than the one he picks up and throws on the table. This movie and King Kong and Son of Kong were created by RKO. If you're interested, it's still there. If you go to the corner of Gower and Melrose in Hollywood, it's now the Paramount lot, but if you go right to the corner of Gower and Melrose, you'll see the globe, the original RKO globe, right there on the corner. It's still there. The company still exists. They haven't made a movie in ages. Sadly, they did a remake of this at Disney. Disney financed it, of course. RKO owns the property, right? So they went together and did it. When they did the remake in '98, so 50 years after this, the character of Joe was done many different ways. Rick Baker's Cinovation Studio built a full-size, gigantic, full-size Joe, mechanical, beautifully done. There was another one that was mechanical that was seated. Most of the movie of what Rick Baker's shop contributed was a suited performer, smaller than I am, in a full, very realistic Mighty Joe suit. And he was played by a guy named John Alexander, who had done Gorillas in the Mist and, I think, Greystoke. He worked on Greystoke. And John Alexander did all of the Rick Baker films. They made a little one, too. The late, great Vern Troyer was in a little Mighty Joe suit. So that was all Rick Baker's. The rest of the movie was handled by two companies who did a digital Joe. One was called Dream Quest Images, DQI in Simi Valley. So they did a digital Joe in the '98 movie, but they couldn't finish the movie, so a lot of shots went to Industrial Light and Magic, and they did their own digital Joe. For the roping sequence that we saw here. We're short on time. Gentlemen, we're gonna go down the row here. If you had to tell the audience one thing about why they should see this movie, learn more about Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien, what would you tell them?
Wow. I think it probably encapsulates all the techniques that O'Brien used in comp and then extends them even further. They were more technically enhanced, more complicated, more in-depth, I guess you should say. And for example, there's more interaction between the characters, between the human characters. And there's also, when Joe would reach, there was a rear projection behind him, and then he'd reach over a matte painting and touch, rear projected characters below him. So that was the depth of it was really interesting. I just think that it encapsulates all the techniques that O'Brien had perfected at that point, and it was, I think he probably had more of a budget even than Khan. Is that possible? To execute this? It cost $1.5 million in 48 or so. I don't know what Khan's budget was in 32 or 33, but he just had a lot to work with, and he was sort of splurging in a way. It was a very exquisite example of stop motion.
The thing you were talking about where it reaches over and there's a matte painting, were those elements Linwood Dunn's process to composite?
No, that was not composite at all. That was a physical
in camera
on the set. Yeah.
Got it. Craig Reardon, why should our audience here go and check this movie out, learn more about Willis O'Brien, and of course, Ray Harryhausen worked until 1981. 30 more years after this, he was working on his own films. His last one, anyone? Flash of the Titans, 1981. But he did, after this work with O'Brien, he did his own stuff. I think it started with The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. I believe that was the first one in 1953. So right after this, he's in his 30s, he starts making his own movies. And there's so many, 20 Million Miles to Earth, and Jason and the Argonauts, and 3 Sinbad movies. So, Greg, why should they go into a deep dive on Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien?
Well, I tell you, it's a candy box, really, of this kind of approach to special effects. There's everything in it up to that point. And another reason, if any of you have never seen it, those are just like aperitifs. You've got to see it because there are sequences that eclipse the one before, and then again they get more complicated, more aggressive. Ray wrecks that entire nightclub that you saw glimpses of in that clip. Literally tears the entire thing down with animation that you can't find anything better. It's absolutely astonishing. It's exhilarating watching him kick the shit out of this nightclub. And then at the end he becomes a hero, and out of left field, literally, there's a burning orphanage. It's really a Deus Ex Machina, like, what? At that point in the story, but the cowboy, played by the great Ben Johnson, who went on, he was the actor that later got an Oscar out of all of those people. So Ben Johnson and little Terry Moore let Joe out, and he climbs up a tree, and he saves these little orphans from an orphanage. which of course gets him completely out of jail from the authorities that want to arrest him for ruining the nightclub, because he's a hero now, right? But, so it's a lovely story. Marion C. Cooper meant it as like a comic strip. He said he did. And it's entertaining from start to finish. But as an exhibit of the Labor Harryhouse's work, and with all tremendous respect due Willis O'Brien, his inspiration, I had the great pleasure of knowing Ray, and so did Randy, and Randy knew him better than I did. And I never met anyone with less grandeur. There's no self-importance. He appreciated people who appreciated him, but he was good company. He was just a nice man. And I at least frequently found myself pinching myself like, this can't be the guy that did all that. It just can't be. But it was. It really dramatizes for me the difference between a movie great and what their work and who they are. They can be all over the map. So it was a great honor to know him, but I'm a fan first and always where he's concerned. I don't lay heavily on the friendly element. That was from Ray. I mean, shit, who am I? Who was I? He was friendly to me. That was an honor. And though he was a lovely guy, he's a god to me. That other part of him, he was inspirational not only to me, who I went into makeup stuff, but he was inspirational to, it's since come out, filmmakers, directors, actors. Hell, Tom Hanks giving him a special award for the Oscars said that seeing Jason the Argonauts and seeing the skeleton fight, he said, I want to be one of those guys fighting the skeleton, an actor in other words. So it went off in every direction. It was just because of the spectacular talents of this guy. Anyway, that's enough.
No, that's excellent. And I've heard from many baby boomers who are now in the industry, yourselves included, and the Rick Bakers and the Rob Boteens and
I can assure you, yeah, I knew them all, yeah.
Dennis Murin, people like that, they all told me the same thing. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Ken Ralston, another one. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which Ray did in Seventh Voyage, 58. So 10 years or so after he did this, was the movie that inspired them to get into the industry. They've all said the same thing that the Seventh Voyage did. Mr. Cook, why should we learn more about Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien?
Well, I'll second or third the Seventh Voyage comment. It was my introduction to this kind of picture when I was 7 years old. And beautiful looking picture, great characters, not as well developed as Joe or sympathetic. Great score by Bernard Herrmann. It's a really, really good picture. That's one to see. If you want to look into this film, you want to watch this one, it's a great kids picture, and it's satisfying as a movie and family friendly. Seventh Voyage, basically, you mentioned Dennis Murin. Dennis Murin has a little bowl full of sand from the beach in Spain where they filmed Seventh Voyage. That's how big a fan he is.
That's on my bucket list. I don't think I'm going to make it.
But the thing with Ray that is remarkable is, unlike today's committee produced enterprises, Ray and O'Brien each put his own personality onto the screen as an artist, and we're in an age where some goofball can write a prompt. A guy I'm working with wrote one sentence in this new piece of AI software, one sentence, and he created a marketplace, and he created a marketplace in ancient Baghdad. Very convincing, moving, everything, and but it's disgusting. But it's disgusting in that it doesn't take the talent and the passion that Ray or Obie had, and Obie, very great sketch artist too, really good. But they, what you can take away from those films is their passion, because every scene is infused with creative ideas, especially Ray's earlier films, you know? He really had something to prove. Sinbad, my favorite, probably primary among them, because it's got just, it's a wonderful tour through mythology, you know, and all these great characters. And of course, his favorite film was King Kong. His favorite film was another favorite was Thief of Baghdad. And so, Seventh Voyage is basically King Kong stomping around through Baghdad, right? You know, and it's just a very human contribution to the movies. And it's like Wells or somebody who does everything. You know, he really came up with the stories. He came up with the techniques for putting those stories on screen. And he is somebody who's definitely worth watching, you know?
O'Brien was also in on story conferences for Joe.
Absolutely, oh, absolutely.
And I think he should have been a co-producer. And Cooper kind of promised back when they were doing She that he was going to be a co-producer. It never happened.
Yeah.
But O'Brien came up with not only gags, but story elements. And then Ray said that O'Brien told him he was very disappointed because they used his material, never gave him the credit for story.
Yes, that's an unknown thing in Hollywood, isn't it?
Well, Ray's pictures are basically completely mapped out by him and visually, and then they got the screenwriter to like make them talk. You know, but not to diminish what some very good screenwriters do. But like Steve is saying, Obie became the model for Ray. He basically had the movie in a pile of drawings.
And sadly, Obie didn't have the career that Ray had, because he had lots of ideas, some of them good, some not so good. There was a film about cowboys discovering the lost world of dinosaurs called Wanji, where the cowboys rope a tyrannosaur. And that was developed for a long time with tests and puppets.
And I think it was going to be in Technicolor, which
Yeah.
would have been, geez. And in the 40s when Westerns were huge, you know, that was the one that got away.
Wasn't there another one called War Eagles?
Yeah. That was prehistoric Vikings versus Nazis.
What a concept.
In Zeppelins, right?
Were there Zeppelin? Maybe. I don't remember if that was true.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm such a big fan of this movie that my fourth son by my third wife is named Joe. Can you believe that? Did everyone get a handout? It's got a stop motion history. Enjoy it. I printed it for you guys. I hope you had fun. Did you enjoy our panel? Yeah. I'm going to call up our guests. Please come to the front of the stage for a once-in-a-lifetime photo, because the 100th anniversary, I might not be here. So this is a one-shot deal, once-in-a-lifetime photo. Please, Mr. Reldy William Cook, come to the front. Mr. Fred Reardon. Mr. Stephen L. Austin. Once-in-a-lifetime photo. Go ahead, folks. And then we're going to see you next time. Please stay tuned for the amazing American Werewolf in London panel coming up.
Thank you, Scott.
Get together.
Thank you, Scott.
Get together, guys.
Quickly. Let's get together weather.
That was a 10,000 Fingers of Dr. T. Williker, or 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. Williker reference. Get together weather.
Thank you guys very much.
That is a lot of people again.